Hey, it's Scott Petrak with another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. The Browns season ended Saturday night in Baltimore at 3-14. Then things got interesting. Offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey and offensive line coach Andy Dickerson were fired, and the Browns ended up with the number 2 pick in the draft Sunday. Then general manager Andrew Berry revealed Monday Deshaun Watson suffered a setback in his recovery from a ruptured Achilles tendon. Here to discuss, as always, is Dave Chudowsky of the WKYC Morning News. What's going on, Chud?
Hey, Scott. Yeah, plenty going on with the Browns, even though the season's now over. Thankfully, I got to tell you, I know that I'm not alone and just kind of happy that it's over. I mean, it was a miserable season, and I'm looking forward. I think I mentioned this last time. I love the NFL playoffs. I wish the Browns were a part of it. They were last year. They're not this year, but let's do it. Let's get into the playoffs. But yeah, it's like, where do you want to begin, right? I mean, we have plenty of spots, but I'm going to guess you probably want to start with Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing there, Chud. Yeah, it was. I don't know if you were listening live to the news conference, but we had a bunch of questions to ask Andrew Berry. Obviously, he didn't see when we talked to him during the bye week. It was frustrating because he didn't say much of anything, and we went over that on the pod. So it felt like this was an opportunity. Maybe he would open up a little bit. Maybe he would get into the, need to rebuild the roster and all those kinds of things. And as he gets done with his opening statement, which includes him being embarrassed by the 3-14 record, he says, "Before I open it up to questions, I got to tell you, Watson had a setback, and we don't really know what that means." It's like, oh my gosh. So, of the now the questions change. The tone of the Deshaun Watson questions certainly change. And he didn't have a whole lot of answers, but he did not rule out surgery. He didn't have a timetable. And if he didn't rule out surgery, to me, that means there's a good chance he's going to have surgery. We're taping this Wednesday morning. Who knows? We could find out Wednesday afternoon that he is due for surgery and ruled out for 2025. I think that is on the table. And I wrote an analysis that posted late last night, this morning on Brown Zone. And the point of it was when he first said it, my thought was this makes what was an uncertain quarterback situation even more uncertain. Because while whether it was good or bad thing, we knew Watson was coming back to be part of the quarterback room. They owe him too much money. The cap hit is too big. They did the restructure a couple weeks ago. All signs pointed to that he was coming back. Now, it was far-fetched to believe that he would be the starter, but he was going to be in that room. So him not being in there changes things for the Browns because they figured they had at least one of the three guys. Now, so that was my first thought. The more I thought about it was, let's assume he's not going to be part of this. Either he misses the beginning of the season or he misses the entire season because of the setback. I think it gives the Browns freedom and clarity because now you don't have to worry about Watson. And that should free them up. They had to redo the quarterback room regardless. I think they got to get a rookie. I draft a rookie, whether it's number 2 or somewhere else. I think they have to do that. And I think they have to sign a veteran, regardless of where they draft the rookie. But it gives them the clarity to say, hey, we can redo the entire quarterback room. If it's 2 veterans, if it's a rookie, a young guy, and a veteran, whatever that is, not having the kind of albatross of Deshaun Watson hanging around their necks, I think it frees up the Browns. It's terrible news for Deshaun Watson, because I'm sure he wants to come back and try to play. But I think this frees up the Browns. And then to take it one more step, if he's not around in 2025, let's say, it makes it a lot easier for the Browns to get rid of him after 2025. You only have the 1 year of the cap hit left. So you can see a path to no more Deshaun Watson as quarterback of the Browns at all. And I know we talked about that when the Achilles happened in October, but then it kind of felt like, well, no, it didn't. He was going to be back. And now I've shifted, and maybe it's a little premature, but I don't think it is. I've shifted to we might never see Deshaun Watson in a Browns uniform again.
Yeah. Is there anything on the back channels? Have I missed anything? Reports say, or anyone going on X, or anything with more information than what we learned from
No,
the presser with Barry? Nothing out there.
no, not that I've seen at all, Chuck. No, and I
Okay.
expect. I mean, I expect an official update from the Browns at some point this week. Um,
Mhm.
but I've not seen any, any kind of rumors or anything like that.
So we've learned you kind of have to read between the lines and listen to what they say and kind of come to your own opinion, or even find some factual things in there they're just not willing to say. But tell me if I'm wrong here. And I listened to a lot of it. I read most of it. I feel like you guys did a good job trying to, you know, find out if there was a future for Watson in Cleveland. And I feel like Barry, every time that kind of came up, he just kept saying how his concern and the Browns' concern is making sure that Watson's healthy again. But I feel like in the past, they would always say, whether he was hurt or not, they always talked about he was the future still and that they still backed him. And I don't feel like you got that here. Did you read into that at all? Do you see what I'm saying there? That
Yes.
without saying it, by just saying, "Hey, we hope he's healthy," but they did not give Barry did not say anything to the regard of, "Hey, we believe he can be the guy again."
Yeah, I think that certainly is the correct way to read that, Chud. And I thought during the bye, Andrew Barry went that way a little bit. He got asked a bunch of questions about Watson and Watson's future, and I think he left the door open for Watson to come back as a starter, but he certainly didn't make it during the bye. Like, didn't guarantee Watson would come back as a starter. So I felt like that was the beginning of the shift, and then Monday it was, to me, blatant when he got asked those questions, when he, you know, answered them like you said he did. He talked about the trade in general and said, the bottom line is that the availability, and I'm paraphrasing, the availability and the consistency haven't been nearly good enough. And we have to fix that situation. And I think he probably stopped short of saying, because he had a question that was, does the Watson injury impact what you're going to do at the quarterback room? And he said, no, not really, and whatever else. I think he stopped short of saying we didn't really consider Watson part of the main discussion anyway, that we knew we were going to have to overhaul the room regardless. He stopped short of saying that, but I think that was his intention is that it was going to be different. It was going to be really different. Now, yes, he might have been on the roster, but I thought he hinted toward it like you suggested, but didn't go all the way there.
Okay, so over the next month and months, we'll have plenty of time to really break this down and spend a lot of time on it. But just quickly set yourself up for where we will go in later weeks. Just give me a quick opinion of what happens now at quarterback. You've already basically
Yeah.
said you think Watson's out, as far as being the starter of this team moving forward. Do they draft a guy at number 2? Do they make a trade? Do they go via free agency? Not who will it be, but
Right.
how will they go about it?
Yeah. Let's start with, I don't think Jameis Winston comes back. I'm guessing Bailey Zappi doesn't. He could come back as, the fourth guy just to have in training camp, or potentially third guy. I think Dorian Thompson-Robinson fits in that same category where he's under contract. I know the organization has always liked him. I don't think they view him as any kind of answer, but can you take up one of the 90 offseason roster spots? Sure. Now to the important part. The draft is in April. I believe the first night of the draft is April 24th. Before then, you have free agency. You have veterans become available. I think the Browns, whether it's free agency or trade, I don't think that matters, Judd, in this discussion. I think somehow they land a quarterback that they think can come in and be the starter, whether that's Kirk Cousins or Russell Wilson or Derek Carr or J.J. McCarthy, whoever that is. I think they take care of that in March. And then when you get to the draft in April, I think they certainly draft a quarterback. Um, and I'm not even sure the guy, unless it's J.J. McCarthy, right? If it's anybody else, if it's, Cousins or Wilson, somebody like that, I think they could take a quarterback as high as number 2, whether that's Shadir Sanders or Cam Ward, depending on who's there, depending on who the Titans don't take at number 1. I think they could certainly take a quarterback at number 2, and if they don't at number 2, then it could be in the second round, third round, whatever. I don't think they leave this offseason without a significant veteran addition. Now, maybe not an expensive one, right? Maybe not a guy like Deshaun Watson, right? Maybe they don't make that type of move. It's just a bridge quarterback, a stopgap guy, and then they add somebody in the draft and potentially at number 2.
All right, we'll circle back to Andrew Berry in a moment. Let's get to the other big headline is Sunday morning. We found out that they fired their offensive coordinator and offensive line coach. Scott, were you surprised by this?
No. I mean, geez, Chud, the Browns are last in the league at 15.2 points a game. The run game struggled all year. They gave up a ton of sacks. Now, we've talked about it. I thought it wasn't so much the offensive line as the quarterbacks for a lot of those sacks, but all those things go back to the offensive line coach. You could tell Mike Vrabel was spending a lot of time with the offensive line, whether that was an Andy Dickerson problem or not. And then to Ken Dorsey, I'm sure I have no doubt that he's a smart guy. But they brought him in to juice up the passing game. And it was supposed to be Deshaun Watson. He was supposed to thrive in this Ken Dorsey system with the spread and the RPO and the shotgun. And it didn't work. Watson was 1-6 as a starter, or the Browns were 1-6 while Watson was a starter. He never threw for 200 yards. The Browns never scored 20 points when he was, with that kind of system before they went back to more play action under center with Jameis Winston. But even with then, Dorsey called the plays. And things got temporarily better with Winston quarterbacking, but still too many turnovers. All of it. The offense killed this team. He's the offensive coordinator. I thought his message in news conferences was garbled. It wasn't a smooth communication. And my guess is if you communicate with the media like that, that's probably how you communicate with the players. So it felt like for a long time that he was going to be the guy that gets fired. And if you want to call him the scapegoat, that's fine. But you don't run that offense and have the worst offense in the league and stick around, especially when it makes sense to me that they're going to go back to a more Kevin Stefanski, in quotation marks, system with perhaps wide zone scheme and play action passing and run heavy, things that Ken Dorsey does not major in.
I just don't understand why, after making the playoffs and winning as many games as they did last year, do they switch to another system like this and bring in a guy who the Buffalo Bills didn't even want anymore? It just makes no sense to me, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, the Bills thing is a completely legitimate point, Chud. I mean, they fired him at midseason last year and then got hot without him. And as we see this year, got really hot without him again with Joe Brady, right, as a coordinator. As far as the system change, I think it's a fascinating argument. We've touched on it throughout the season. It was about Deshaun Watson and maximizing his talent and his skill set. And we saw a gradual shift to that in 2022 and 2023. You don't bring in a quarterback with Watson's running ability, improvisational skills, and then ask him to just stand in the pocket. Like, that doesn't make sense. So I understand why you would shift things and change things, because that's right. The greatest coaches suit their systems to their players. So we saw that, but you didn't see Watson completely click. So that's what 2024 is about. It was about a change to make Watson great, and it didn't happen. And I think in hindsight, and Jack Conklin said this on Sunday, he said, you don't build your offense around one guy. And maybe that's true, maybe it's not. It depends who your quarterback is, right? I mean, the Bills system is built around Josh Allen, but he's Josh Allen. I think the point is Deshaun Watson was never, with Cleveland, an elite quarterback. So it turned out to be counterproductive to build everything around him. And by changing the system, you make Joe Bitonio and Wyatt Teller less effective because they're not pulling as much. You make maybe David Njoku's not as effective because he's in a different system, a slightly different role, asked to do different things because of Watson. And then Watson isn't good enough in it. And then when you take him out of it, you got to revert. And it's too hard to do that in midseason.
So that seems to be a theme from locker room clean out and from what you're seeing here at the end of the year is that this offense needs to go back to run the ball, play action pass, right?
Yeah, I believe that. I just think it makes sense with Kevin Stefanski. No, it doesn't have to be exactly like it was in 2020. Things need to evolve. But I do take stock in what Joe Bitonio and Jack Conklin said, and they were pretty strong about that. And I trust those guys. Joe Bitonio said that he and Wyatt Teller are good pullers, and that's what they used to do a lot in that wide zone scheme. He said he used to do it 8 or 10 times a game. He thinks he did it 8 or 10 times all season this year. So, there can be tweaks. You can go from, the Rams are good at this under Sean McVay. They go from a wide zone scheme and then they go to more of a gap scheme. Like they change it year in and year out, but it feels less severe as the changes the Browns went through. So, yeah, you want to be multiple. You want to be versatile. Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, they would not buy into that line of questioning. They said that, it's all about being sound and explosive on offense. I think they want to leave their options open depending on who they hire as a coordinator. But to me, it just makes sense to go back to that, especially when you marry it with the quarterback search. Let Kevin Stefanski find quarterbacks that fit that system. And I think that would work for everybody. I think that would benefit everybody.
Scott, when Stefanski gave up the offensive coordinator duties, I thought for sure, the play calling, play calling, yeah. I guess you always just kind of consider him the offensive coordinator, but anyway, he gives up the play calling duties. I thought for sure that it was maybe like came down from somewhere else, like, hey, you gotta just, give it up for now, be head coach. But now, the more I think about it, do you think this was his decision? Like, hey, I'm going to show everyone that, and I don't mean he was exactly saying this verbatim, but in his mind, he's like, all right, hey, you guys want to see what it would be like with Dorsey? Let's go see what it's like. And he knew what it was going to end up happening, and it would actually make him look better.
Well, I don't know if he thinks like that.
Right.
I do think there's something to be said for last ditch effort and, okay, prove to me that you deserve this job. I'm going to give you the reins to this offense and prove to me that you can be my coordinator. And it didn't work. There's a temporary bump with Winston, like we talked about. To me, that was more about Winston than it was Dorsey and the play calling. So I think all those things are possible, Chud, but I do think there was, okay, it's been failing. You've been failing. Here's your chance to keep your job, and it didn't work.
Yeah. So what's next, offensive coordinator? Who's going to be the new OC, do you think?
Well, here's the guys that jumped to the forefront of my mind. Clint Kubiak, who he was with New Orleans. They fired their head coach, Dennis Allen, during the season. Kevin Stefanski worked with him in Minnesota. They run the same scheme. When they went down to New Orleans, we talked about everyone in the run up to that game, how it looks a lot like the old Stefanski system. Because Stefanski learned the Stefanski system from Gary Kubiak, Clint's dad. And Gary Kubiak learned it from Mike Shanahan. So it's a Shanahan system, it's a Kubiak system. So Clint Kubiak would be like such a smooth transition if they really wanted to go back to what they ran in 2020, 2021. It would just make a ton of sense. So I would put him high on the list. Now, maybe Stefanski, wants to go different. Maybe he's trying to expand his, circle, right? He likes the idea of new ideas. And I think some fans get frustrated by this. Like, I believe Kevin Stefanski, I believe Andrew Berry when they talk about those big picture things. Like, you want new voices. And last year they wanted to bring in college guys. Like, I believe they're trying to grow the offense, that they don't want to be stagnant. That's how they think. So, maybe he doesn't want to go with the easy pick, right? The guy that makes so much sense on face value for whatever reason. Regardless, Clint Kubiak would be at the top of the list for me. Tommy Rees is an interesting candidate, Chud. I know that he's going to interview um, for the OC job. Now, he spent this year as tight ends coach with the Browns. He was the coordinator play caller for Notre Dame. He was also a quarterback in Notre Dame. He was the coordinator play caller at Alabama under Nick Saban. So he's done this job. He's young. Um, I think the only issue with promoting Tommy Rees to this job, and I mean, first of all, I don't know if he'd be a success, but I know he's a smart guy. He interviewed twice to be the North Carolina head coach before the job went to Bill Belichick. So he is, wanted in coaching circles. Um, I would think that Mike Vrabel, if he gets a head coaching job, would think about adding Tommy Rees as his coordinator if the Browns let him. So that would be a reason for the Browns to try to keep him too. So my point is, this is a smart young guy that people think highly of in the business. I think the one from a public relations standpoint detraction would be he was on the staff of the worst offense in the league. Now, he wasn't calling the plays, he wasn't designing the system. So I don't know if you hold that against him or not, but I certainly think it would be a factor in people's view of the hiring if you just go internal and get Tommy Rees, then it doesn't feel like a splash. It doesn't feel like significant change. But those are the two guys to me that right now make a lot of sense and would probably be the favorite. To me, I would consider bringing back Alex Van Pelt. I don't think they're going to go in that direction, but if they wanted to get the band back together, it worked pretty well while he was here. I know AVP was super popular. So those are the guys that jump to the forefront of my mind. There's a million quarterback coaches out there. There's college coordinators. The Browns, when they do this kind of search, they usually do an extensive, wide search. So I'd expect that again. But those would be Kubiak and Rees, to me, are the early favorites.
Okay, that's interesting. Van Pelt, that would be
Yeah,
something.
right.
I don't want to talk long about it. We'll talk more as the later on, but I think we definitely saw how Callahan leaving in the offensive line, that definitely was a major difference from last year to this year.
No doubt about it. And the performance of the line wasn't as good. And they had injuries, right? They started the season without left tackle Jed Wills Jr. being healthy, without right tackle Jack Conklin being healthy. Then they lose DeJuan Jones. Wills is in and out. Ethan Posick was hurt for a little bit. Wyatt Teller was on IR for 4 games. So that had part to do with it. But there was a drop off. I didn't think Ethan Posick played as well as he had in the past. And again, maybe that's because the scheme they went to didn't fit him as well. But at the heart of that is an offensive line coach, and you lose one of the best in the business. It was a tough spot for Andy Dickerson to walk into. There wasn't a commitment to the run early. Philosophically, I didn't believe, and I think that hurt the run game throughout the season. Joe Bitonio said as much, but I don't think Dickerson. It didn't feel like Dickerson did a lot to overcome all those obstacles.
Scott, do you see any more changes coming? And as we have talked about, we felt Stefanski and Barry were going to be safe. Do you still agree with that?
Yeah, they're safe. I mean, it would be a huge. Yeah, I mean, they're coming back. So yes, and I understand the desire for stability and continuity. We talked about it. I think Andrew Berry deserves to be. I'm sorry. I think Kevin Stefanski deserves to come back. I don't think he forgot how to coach. We could have a legitimate argument about whether Andrew Berry should be trusted to rebuild or whatever they're going to do. They don't want to call it a rebuild. To fix this team for 2025, we could have a serious discussion about that, given his track record of roster moves and talent evaluation. But they are coming back. Kevin Stefanski said they're tied at the hip, which I thought was interesting because I'm not sure if I would want to be tied to the hip with Andrew Berry, but Stefanski used that term. And as far as other major changes, there won't be other major changes, which means Bubba Ventrone, the special teams coordinator, comes back. I think Bubba's a good coach. The special teams struggled this year. They're not pinning that on him, so he's going to come back. Now, could we see minor changes? Certainly, depending on who you bring as offensive coordinator, that could affect who stays on the offensive staff. If other guys get opportunities elsewhere for promotions, that could change. But that'll be the end of that's expected, at least, and I think it will be the end of the major changes.
You know, Scott, it's amazing what you just said about Barry and Stefanski. I literally just had a conversation with someone yesterday, and I said I absolutely 100% back Stefanski. All right, maybe not 100, but in the 90s, right? I mean, like, there's no question in my mind he deserves another shot. But I'm just like you. I'm 50-50 on Barry. Like, I there's times where, you know, I'm on board, and then there's times where I'm not, and then you get nervous about him being at the control deck for the second pick of the draft. I mean, I'm with you.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and the fact that they feel like a package deal, which I'm not sure I always thought they would be, even though they were hired kind of together. But I thought this would be a time for them to separate. You know, if the Hasms decided to make some kind of move, but it feels like they're together, and they better both get it right, or else they're probably both in trouble.
Yeah, no question, no question. Barry's got all kinds of partners. He's got a thought partner, and then he's got, you know, all right, maybe we should move on. But hey, the one cool thing about technology is you can pause and start back up. And just so we can, a little inside baseball here, you and I had to pause our discussion from early Wednesday to later in the afternoon on Wednesday. And with that, we have breaking news. The Browns have a new offensive line coach, right?
They do. Mike Bloomgren. So this is only 3 days after they fired Andy Dickerson, like we talked about. And Bloomgren he spent the last 7 years coaching Rice. He was a head coach, got fired in October, took him to back-to-back bowl games, which is the fourth time that's ever happened in Rice history. It's not a football factory. Spent time at Stanford before that, pro-style offenses, worked for the Jets for 4 years when they went to those two AFC championship games under Rex Ryan in 2009 and 10. So he's been around 26 years as a coach. They must have had him targeted for this to come together that fast.
I was thinking the same thing. Yeah. I mean, they were ready to go on this. So we'll see how that plays out. Let's go back to both of the press conferences. And let's start with Barry. Let's go back to him. And, you know, right at the front, he said that they're embarrassed. Do you believe that they're embarrassed, Scott? I mean, do you feel that they truly feel the pain that the fans are feeling?
I do. I was surprised to use that word. It's felt a little uncharacteristic of Barry to me. You know, they always use the frustrating and the disappointed, but he went that further step with the embarrassed. And to me, it makes all the sense in the world. They should be embarrassed. 3-14 is not nearly good enough. He talked about the decisions he made wound up not being good enough. You know, didn't take it all on himself. Said it's a whole lot of people sharing it, which he's right. He talked about on the sidelines, which means coaching. On the field, he said some of the best players didn't play up to their ability. And when all that happens, that's how you go 3-14. And we talked so much about these unmet expectations. And it's the roster wasn't as good as they thought it would be. The coaching wasn't as good. And then you see Dorsey and Dickerson get fired. And the players, and you can point to whether it's David Njoku, who had injuries to deal with all year long, but still wasn't the same player that he was last year when he had the breakout year in 2023. Martin Emerson Jr., cornerback, wasn't nearly as good as he was in 2022 and 2023, and that really hurt the defense. And I'm sure you could go through the roster and point to guys like that. Yeah, I think of Ethan Posick, the center, who's been really solid, but I thought took a step back this year. And when you have those regressions across the board, especially from some of your top guys, that helps get to 3-14, not to mention the disaster at quarterback.
Yeah, not to mention. So 2 follow-ups to that. And one of them, Scott, is I was at an event the other night, and I had 2 diehard Browns fans and we're not talking fans that are just in their, teens or 20s. Like, these are guys that have been around for a long time as Browns fans. And they literally are saying they feel worse right now than they did at 0-16 and 1-15. I mean, that's how bad some fans feel right now.
Yeah, well, Myles Garrett and Joe Bitonio said the same thing, Chud, and it's really startling to hear that. It makes sense. I understand it. And the point, I think, tell me if you disagree, but the fans' point would be the same, that the expectation was so much higher. In 2016 and 17, you knew they were going to be bad. Right? They went full tank, full rebuild, whatever it was. And there were no super expectations. Well, this year, that was exactly different. You're coming off a playoff year. You bring back so many of the same guys. And 3 wins compared to 0 wins, I get it. 0 wins is way worse. But if you're only expecting 4 wins in that year and you're expecting 10 or 11 this year, that's where the giant difference is. So, and it was bad early. It didn't take a while for this to get bad. It was bad from the start. You lose those back-to-back games to the Giants and the Raiders early, and that was pretty much the end of it. So I get it, but it just shows you, and this is the point you're trying to illustrate, it shows you how bad it was for this to surpass the second winless season in NFL history.
Yeah, no question. I think one of my answers to both of them, and I've seen this on social media as well. It's not just these two people. I mean, this is a lot of people feel this way.
Yeah.
My answer, first thing I think of is Deshaun Watson. I mean, just what a disaster that trade was, how it's hanging over the team now. And I really think that gives a lot of fans a bad taste.
Oh, there's no doubt about it, Chud. And it's from the move itself alienated so much of the fan base. And just from off the field, right, all the sexual misconduct and assault allegations. On top of that, then he came in and hasn't been on the field. When he's been on the field, has been bad. I don't think he's been particularly likable, whether it's in interviews, on social media. So you put all that together, and he has become the face of disappointment, the face of unmet expectations. And even if you go back to last year when they go 11-6 and make the playoffs, it wasn't because of him. I mean, they won games when he was quarterback early, and he had that great second half against the Ravens. But we think of Joe Flacco because Joe Flacco threw for 300 yards in 4 straight games and clinched the playoffs, and it wasn't Deshaun Watson. So, it's easy to point there. And I wrote this analysis on Bronzo. I think I mentioned it earlier, and I think that's why it would be such a relief if they could just move on from him. If he's not around this year, if it's never a question of, hey, is Watson going to be the backup? Is he going to be the 3? Is he ever going to play? I'm not saying this from his standpoint, obviously it would be devastating for him, but from an organization, fan base standpoint, if you could just wipe him off out of the mind for 2025, and then probably that would lead to him being done, period. I think it would be a breath of fresh air for most parties involved.
Yeah, so you're kind of saying, all right, well, we lost the draft picks. We've already had, we're over that. That was a
Right.
tough pill to swallow. So you're past that. And if you know he's not going to play anymore and you don't think he's the future guy and he's hurt, then really the only thing there is the money. And, does that really affect the fans? I mean, does money really affect the fans at the end of the day if they're able to put something together?
No, you're exactly right. I'm glad you brought up the draft picks because that's part of it too, right? Then there's a segment of the fan base upset that they gave up 3 number 1s for Watson. And then add on top of that is the salary cap situation they're in. And they insist that they will be able to make moves necessary. I tend to believe them to some degree. I don't think they're in salary cap jail, but I think they got to be careful with what moves they make. And I think it will limit some of the moves they make because he's a $73 million cap hit. So that is part of this whole debacle. But then, I think once you get past this year and you get your draft picks back, right? They start picking again in the first round. And all that combined is a chance for them to get over the mess.
Okay, so you just listened to both
press conferences, and you are right on it every single day. So I ask you, Scott Petrak, is next year, are the Browns now in a rebuild, or are they going to keep it intact and try to be a winner again like they were last year?
I think they're going to try to win again, Chud. Now, I think you have to be realistic about, are they a legitimate Super Bowl contender? Which, I kind of thought, I don't know if I thought they were heading into this year, but I thought they were in that discussion. I thought the roster compared to other big-time teams. I'm not ready to go that far. I don't know how you could coming off 3-14. But can they win 9 or 10 games next year? I would say yes. Now, they have to be really successful in this offseason. They have to find the right quarterback this offseason. They have to fill in the holes. They need guys to step up that they're counting on. If they assume said Tillman's going to be their number 3 receiver, so they don't go get a number 3, then said Tillman has to play like that. You could say that at left tackle if they decide to give it to DeJuan Jones, which we'll talk about that later. I think they're going to go get a left tackle, but that type of thing, right? If they're counting on some young guys to step up, those guys better do it. So they need a really good offseason. But if you have Myles Garrett and you have Denzel Ward and you have Jerry Jeudy, these are legitimate pieces that you should be able to build around as opposed to tear it down. So I think, plus the margin for error in this league is so thin that 3-14 is not that far away from 10-7, especially the way this season ended. Their injuries are playing DTR. They could have won more games this year. So let's say they're 6-11. Can you see them getting 4 more wins next year? Yeah, I don't think that's ludicrous, especially if you're not the worst team in the league in turnovers, right? Their turnover margin was the worst in the league. So I think they can get to the point where they're in playoff contention. And while that might not be enough for some people, I think that would be significant improvement and enough to satisfy a guy like Myles Garrett, who obviously made it extremely public and clear that he doesn't want to go through that kind of rebuild again.
Yeah, you brought up a lot of things we're going to touch on here, but before we do that, let's just put to bed the Stefanski presser. And one thing that stood out to me is he said that nobody's more committed to fixing it than him. Do you feel comfortable with that? And also back to the play calling, do you figure, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, but let's talk about it again, will he be calling the plays again?
Yeah, I do think he is the right guy to help fix it. Now, he's not in charge of the roster, so they're going to have to figure that out, and that's Andrew Berry. I think Andrew Berry should let Kevin Stefanski be a super involved in the quarterback acquisition, free agency, draft, whatever it is. I think Kevin Stefanski should and will call plays again next year. I think that makes sense. I've always thought he did a good job of it. It's too early to tell. We don't know who the coordinator is going to be. If it's Tommy Rees, the tight ends coach, I would think that it would be a no-brainer for Stefanski to be the play caller. So, if you're trying to rekindle what happened in, those 2 playoff years of 2020 and 2023, it's Stefanski is a play caller, and it's to a large degree his offensive system. So why not go back to that?
Anything from Barry and Stefanski that you heard that you wanted to address before we move on?
No, we talked Nick Chubb earlier, right?
We have not gotten to Chubb.
Okay.
I do have Chubb on the mind, though.
Yeah.
He's one of the guys I'm going to throw at you.
Yeah. Then if you're going to hit me with it, then to me that was that was the only other big takeaway I thought we needed to get to.
Well, let me hit you with Chubb right now. So tell me what's up. I mean, is he going to be back?
It's too early to tell, Chud. Here's what I know is the tone of Andrew Berry's comments about Chud was completely different from a year ago. And that makes me skeptical that Chubb will, or at least skeptical is probably the right word, that he'll come back. It felt like it was automatic last year that he was going to come back. He's coming off the knee injury, all those things, rehabbing it. Now he's coming off that broken foot, but he should be okay, given that should not take that long to heal. But he's a free agent. So the Browns, he's not under contract with the Browns. It gives him the ability to test the market if he wants to test the market. Now, last year he agreed to the restructuring, and it was a big reduction in salary with incentives to gain back some of that. But he didn't have a big year. He only averaged 3.3 yards a carry. So I don't know if the Browns look at him as being done and don't think he can play at a high level anymore, and they're just going to let him walk, or they say, hey, we'd love to have you back. We're still going to add another running back in the draft. We need to see you get back to health and show that you can be the old Nick Chubb, and we're only going to pay you the league minimum. And maybe Chubb says, hey, I deserve more than that, and I'm going to go see if I can get more money somewhere else. Now, I think he's going to have a hard time doing that because he's coming off these injuries and the way he played this year. So maybe they need to give him the freedom to go look around and then come back. And maybe he winds up coming back then, right? But which is something he said he always wanted to do. Always wanted to finish his career here. But this feels like there's an opening for him to leave. And I thought Andrew Berry made that clear. And that would have been after he talked to Chubb at the end of the year. So I feel like there's room here for Chubb to choose to go elsewhere, which from a playing perspective, as good as Nick Chubb was, they haven't had the Nick Chubb since week 2 of last year, right? He was gone the last 15 plus games in 2023, and this year wasn't the same player. So they can live without Nick Chubb, and they're going to have to improve that running game, period. But it would be a significant shift in this organization. He's been the guy and a fan favorite and an organizational favorite since he got here in 2018. It would be something else if he weren't here, even if the reasons for it make sense.
Yeah, this could be a good topic for later in January or February. We could talk about the top 5 or 10 Browns. We could do it 2 ways. We could do a history, and then you'd have to probably go more than 10. But since '99, Chubb's in the top 5. Chubb, Joe Thomas, Dawson, Myles Garrett. Right there, those are the first 4 that come to my mind.
Yeah, probably Batonio's probably on that list.
Oh, well, he's on your list for sure. That's great.
That's a 6-time Pro Bowler, Chubb.
No, I know, but
I know.
But I don't think fans talk about Batonio like they do the other 4 guys. But I get it. I know.
Oh yeah, I know. He's a good guy, right? We established that part.
No, we have. He's great. I think that's another thing we'll talk about over the weeks to come too, is how important that running back position is going to be. And we know in the NFL you can trade him in and trade him out, but if they want to get back to running the ball and play action pass, they're going to need a good running back.
That's exactly right, Chud. There's no doubt about that. And they were missing that element really since Chubb got hurt in week 2. They've been missing that. You've seen glimpses from Jerome Ford, but hasn't been the same. And they're going to have to figure that out. There's no doubt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's move to Myles Garrett now. And when you listen to Andrew Berry, he made it seem pretty clear that he expects him to retire and go to Canton as a Cleveland Brown.
Yep. Yeah. And to me, I took that as they think they can appease Myles as far as they're going to be good enough next year. And we touched on that just a couple minutes ago with, can they win 9 or 10 games? If they lay out a plan for Myles Garrett, it's, hey, we're going to get quarterback X in free agency, quarterback X in the draft. We're going to sign 4 guys, whatever it is. Here's the plan for us to be a contending team with some upside. And we're going to give you a ton of money in a new extension. I think Garrett would be okay. That's what I want to hear. He just doesn't want to hear that Denzel Ward's getting traded and whatever else, right? David Njoku's getting traded and this guy's and Dalvin Tomlinson's getting cut and Jack Conklin's getting cut. If it's, hey, we're going to try to run this back and add to it, that's what he wants to hear. And I think you also wanted to hear that the plan at quarterback isn't just to run Deshaun Watson out there anymore. And that's not the plan. The setback makes that abundantly clear. And I think those things combined will be enough for Garrett, who wants to stay. He's always wanted to stay. He just doesn't want to live with another rebuild after living through 0-16 as a rookie.
All right. Are you okay to go back and talk Batonio? Because I hoping I didn't hurt your feelings earlier there. I wasn't trying to be down on him. Clearly, I think he's one of the best. But
no, I just kidding. But he probably makes that top 5. I'm gonna have to think about that, but he probably makes the top 5.
There you go. It gives you something to think about this week while you're working
Well,
on your golf swing
Well,
somewhere.
I'm back on the treadmill, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. Speaking of that, Scott, I'm not gonna lie. I'm actually walking right now. I'm killing
Good
two
for you,
birds with
buddy.
one stone. Well, it's one of those days. So you kill two birds with one stone. Not that I don't enjoy doing either of these things. I enjoy both of them very much. All right, I'm off on a tangent. Anyway, Batonio, I mean, is he gonna be gone or is he gonna be back?
Well, I think it's interesting, Chuck. We've been talking about that with him for the last 2 or 3 weeks, and I kind of went back and forth. Sometimes I talked to him, or he talked to the group, and I'd be like, "Oh, it sounds like he's coming back." And then I thought the Sunday after the season, like the day after the finale in Baltimore, I kind of was like, "Ooh, I don't know if he's coming back." Now, part of that could be the raw emotion of finishing at 3-14 and how his body feels. And he goes through the exit interviews, and he kept bringing up how frustrated he was by this season. So I think as he gets away from this year and that dissipates and the body feels better, I do think he will come back. I'm not guaranteeing that. I don't know if I put it at 65-35, 60-40. I guess it'd go between 60-40 and 70-30 that he comes back. I don't think it's guaranteed. I did think when Jack Conklin said, "Oh, Joe will be back," I'm not worried about that. He added, "We'll see." That tipped the percentage up for me because I think Conklin probably knows Joel better. So I think he'll be back. If he's not, it's a big loss, and they would have to figure out left tackle. They already have enough other issues. He thought he was playing at a high level at the end of the year. So did Kevin Stefanski, no doubt about it. So plus he adds. I mean, I've said this last week. He adds so much to that locker room that I don't think they want. I know the organization doesn't want to try to figure that out without him. So it would be a huge loss if he walked away. So I think he'll be back, and the Browns hope he'll be back.
Wouldn't it be amazing if you could just put all those guys together now with Thomas, Batonio, Phil Dawson, Josh Cribbs? Like if we could just put the best players we've had over these miserable decades, put them all together, like the good guys, the guys that could just lead the way. Anyway,
you still have to find a quarterback.
Oh my gosh, it all comes back to the quarterback,
Yeah,
no question. Let's hit left tackle real quick. You mentioned it earlier. Just follow up on that.
Yeah, I mean, Jed Wills is going to leave in free agency. At least that's my expectation. I think that's the organization's expectation. So then the really only internal candidate would be DeJuan Jones. And the question is, did he show you enough in 3 starts at left tackle that he can be the answer? And I would say no. I thought he played okay, and I think he was getting better. But that's a big ask, and it's a premium position. Jack Conklin, as well as he played this year, he's had a ton of injuries. I like the idea of getting a new left tackle, and maybe that's in the first round if they trade down from number 2. Maybe take a left tackle. I suppose you could take a left tackle at 2 without taking a quarterback, but I would think they would do a trade down. But maybe you take that guy, and then you have him at left tackle, and you got Jones and Conklin at right tackle in case somebody gets hurt. And both of them have an injury history. Jones is 2 years into the league, and both years he finished on IR. We know he's got to control the weight, which has been an issue with him. So I like him. I think he has potential. I just don't think you can hand him the left tackle job. And we saw what happens when your tackles get injured at the beginning of this year. And I think the Browns need to have depth there. And I would count him as depth, not as my starting left tackle if I were them.
All right. So just in about 30 seconds or a minute, because we're going to talk about this over and over, and it's going to be our life as Browns fans and for you every day. What, just in like 30 or a minute, just real quick, what do you expect him to do at number 2? If your first thoughts, and obviously we're not going to hold you to this, a lot will change, but right now, would you draft a quarterback, or would you go somewhere else and kind of do like what the Commanders did and built their team together until they just found the guy?
Yeah, but they took the guy at number 2. I think the Browns will take a quarterback at 2. Now, that's far from guaranteed. They have to like both quarterbacks. Well, they have to like the quarterback that is theirs too. I would assume that means they would have to like both quarterbacks. that the Titans get the evaluation right and take the number one guy at number one. But here's my thought, Chud. And we know that the experts don't think this is a good quarterback draft class, and that maybe all 5 guys taken last year would be ahead of Sanders and Ward. And that's scary. And you don't have to flash back far to go to the Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis draft, where neither of those guys should have been a first-round pick. There was only one, Pickett. He bombed out of Pittsburgh quickly. Right? Willis was a third-round pick. So is this that type of draft? And if it is, then you can't just force it at number 2. So you can't force it. But if you see enough in a guy where you think, hey, this guy's potential can be high, then I don't think you should be scared about taking a quarterback. I think when you don't get the draft in the top 5 very often, that's when you need to take a shot at a quarterback. So I would lean toward taking one unless you just said there's no way this guy can be the guy, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Hey, what's the one thing we haven't talked about yet?
Oh, man, I don't know.
The game, the final game of the year.
Oh, my God, you're right. Yeah, it's not worth talking about.
No, seriously. Like I don't think there's much to say with it, right?
No, Bailey Zappi threw a pick 6, threw 2 interceptions, continued that trend. Jerry Jeudy got to the franchise season record with 6 or he needed 6. He got to 90 to set that record, and they were obviously trying to get him the record because they threw the ball to him a bunch down the stretch after a rough start for him. But yeah, that was about it.
The bet of the day was the Ravens defense to score, and I may or may not know that firsthand. I don't know, but solid. I mean, that was the bet to make, man, and it had happened early.
You're right. That pick 6 early. Yeah, that was big time. That was good.
And as you see, we talked about this last week. They put the Ravens and Steelers on Saturday, so they played last Saturday, and now they're going to meet up this Saturday. It all worked out for the NFL, right on there. So.
You're right.
All right. One of my favorite things to do on this pod is to do playoff picks, and I think we're getting close to that. But before we do that, this was a long one, man. We have hit a lot. There was a lot that has gone on in the last 3 or 4 days. End of the year, I think we have hit an amazing amount of things. But before we get to the playoffs, is there anything else you have left that I missed?
Ooh, I don't think so, Chug. I feel like we got to what we needed to get to.
Do you believe we've been doing this in some capacity since 2008?
No.
It's crazy, man.
That means I'm old.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
We're getting old. So, I will say this. The one thing I'm bummed out, I would have really liked to have seen the Bengals made the playoffs. How much better would this weekend be? And it's already great. How much better would it be if it was Burrow versus Josh Allen, Bengals, Bills?
Yeah, that would be interesting, Chud. Yeah, that would be such a great matchup. From the Browns' perspective, I don't think you want to see all the other 3 teams in your division go out there and have a chance. And who knows if the Bengals could have went on a crazy run there. Their defense is playing better, and then they wanted to fire their coordinator. But Burrow's playing out of his mind. So it would have been, yes, from a pure watching football perspective, having the playoffs would have added to it. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, and I got to be honest, I actually hate the Broncos more than the Bengals. I would rather see the Bengals make the playoffs than the Broncos. And I mean, the Broncos to me, and I'm sure it is with you and so many fans, are right there with the Steelers, and then obviously the Ravens because of what happened. But you know what I mean? Like, I'm fine if Denver doesn't make it.
Yeah, that's fair. And I'll tell you what, I was getting texts about. They wore those throwbacks for the finale against the Chiefs when they just waxed the Chiefs the other day. And, it was the old, 80s uniforms. And I had buddies, they had to turn it off because they were just having those John Elway flashbacks.
Did you see the Tennessee wearing the old Houston Oilers uniforms the other day?
We had a little discussion about that in the media room, whether they should be allowed to wear it because, it's the same franchise, but they're not in Houston anymore. And then they're playing a Houston team, and I get it. That's why they wear them. And they're such classic uniforms. So
they are.
Those are classics.
Aren't they? I mean, there's something about those. I don't know. Well, it evokes memories, especially remember let's see, 88, right? Where they had to beat them in the last week of the regular season and then played them in the playoffs.
I think I was at that. Yeah, I think I was at that 88 game. The one to get to the playoffs, I think.
I was too. You know, that was one.
So
Yeah, that was one of my first Browns games. I remember. I can't remember what my exact first one was, but that was one of them. So good memories there.
Yeah, my first game was a Jets game. I guess I should go back and look what year it was. Matt Barr hit a field goal. It was like a 10-7 game against the Jets. Yeah, but
oh man,
it's
fun to see the different clips come up on social media with the old Browns clips that come up. I don't know if you see those. Lately, the one with just celebrating the anniversary of that Bills 89 playoff win.
Or how about that?
Awesome.
I saw the people. It was the anniversary of that Jets game in '86. So it wasn't. I mean, it's just a random anniversary, right? But
yeah,
that was. I mean, that was the best Browns game I ever saw.
Oh gosh, incredible! Never forget that. So, all right. Well, hey, I think when we look back, our Super Bowl predictions are still intact, if I remember correctly. I don't have it written down, but I know for sure I went Chiefs and Packers, and I think you went Bills and Eagles.
I think you're right. I'm going to try to call it up here while you talk about it. I know I went Eagles.
Yeah. No, you went Bills, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, there you go. That makes sense.
Yeah. Look it up to verify. But the bottom line is we both have our Super Bowl intact. The question is, and I'll take a little bit of credit for Green Bay being in the playoffs because that was a little more of a dark horse pick, but I have to be honest. If I could switch it, I would now on the Green Bay side. I would not switch the Kansas City pick. So I feel good about Kansas City, a little nervous about the Green Bay side. How do you feel about your Eagles-Bills picks?
I like the Eagles with I'm okay with the Eagles. And with Jalen Hurts, he practiced today. So it looks like he's going to play Sunday, concussion protocol, all those things. I think the Eagles have a chance. Their roster, I think, is really good. So I'm okay with that pick. I would probably go, well, I was gonna say I would go Lions, but the Lions are so banged up that I'm okay with the Eagles.
Okay.
I think if I had to redo it, I would take Kansas City. At home, they got a chance to rest. Mahomes is Mahomes. I would probably go to Kansas City.
So we each would stay with one, and we would each switch one out. You say the Lions are beat up, though, but I mean, gosh, they had no issue taking the number 1 seed and beating Minnesota.
I know, and I watched that game, and I feel like they are so aggressive on both sides of the ball that there's a chance it catches up to them. If they run into a team, like I think if they played Minnesota again, Minnesota would figure it out. Like I don't think you can blitz and play man-to-man like they did and get away with it again. And maybe they can if Sam Darnold misses throws. And I didn't think Justin Jefferson had a great game either. He dropped some passes. But I just feel like that could catch up to him.
All right, final predictions. I finished 11-6, and I believe you finished did you finish 7-10?
I think 7-10. But Chud, I went back. I'm looking. I got Eagles Chiefs. Eagles beating the Chiefs.
Oh, you went Chiefs, not the Bills?
I did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. I could have sworn you took the Bills.
I know. Maybe I made a last-minute switch or something. But, yeah, I'm looking at what I put in the paper. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe on the podcast you went Bills and you switched it on paper.
Yeah.
Or did you have the Bills last year? Maybe that's what I'm thinking.
I might have had the Bills last year. Yeah.
Okay. So you have Chiefs. So Chiefs Eagles. You're sitting pretty.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, I didn't get all my playoff picks right, but I did okay. I mean, I had the Bengals wrong and the Browns wrong, but I had the Rams, Lions. Yeah, I did okay, but not too bad. I'll take it.
Okay. Yeah, no question. You'll take it. All right, well, let's finish this out with playoff picks. Do you want to go in order of the games as they're played?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I think this first one's a tough one. I'm kind of back and forth on it. So I'm going to let you go first and see if that sways me at all. You got Chargers -3 at the Texans.
Might be the hardest game of the weekend.
Hardest game. And by the way, the Texans always play at 4:30 on Saturday in the wild card playoffs. Always.
Yeah, I know. I think they get you think they would get sick of that, because that's right. It's got to be the worst time slot, from a attractive matchup standpoint. It's got to be the worst.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's why they put them there.
Right. So you probably feel slighted as a fan or as a team. Well,
I think it's the 7th time. I saw something on Twitter. I didn't count it up, but yeah, it is unbelievable how many times they played. Yeah.
Wow. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go Chargers. Chud, I think the Texans. They've had some issues on offense. CJ Stroud hasn't been as good. They've had receiver injuries. Obviously, Diggs is hurt. Is done. I love Justin Herbert, and I like Jim Harbaugh in a coaching matchup. So give me the Chargers and whatever. They're favored by 3, right?
Yeah. Yep.
I would take the Chargers, and I take the Chargers to cover.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So I'm going to go and agree with you, and I'm going to take the Chargers as well. But, man, part of me wants to take the Texans just because, they did turn it on against the Browns last year in the playoffs. They do have the home field advantage. That said, you bring up the coaching advantage. Man, it's a tough one, though. I almost feel like you might be right that people are going to maybe jump on taking Houston +3, and the Chargers end up winning by a touchdown or more. I don't know. I don't love it, but I am going to take the Chargers. So we'll be the same there. The other thing, too, is, the Chargers, I think they need to prove something. It's not like it's not like it's not like I sit and look at them and think this is a no-brainer, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
No, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. And and I could be skewed a little bit about that Christmas Day game where the Ravens just killed them, and I went and rewatched that game and it just left a mark maybe.
Yeah, true story. Steelers, Ravens, I have a feeling we'll both go the same way. The Steelers have lost how many in a row?
4 or 5, right?
4 or 5, yeah, 5 maybe. 9.5 Ravens are favored by. And I have to be honest, if the Chiefs don't make the Super Bowl, the Ravens would be my next pick before the Bills, to be honest with you. That's how well the Ravens are doing right now. But I'll go first. I think the next 2 are pretty easy. I'm going Baltimore Ravens here. I don't know if they cover, but they definitely win.
Yeah, I'm going Ravens. I don't think they cover. I was surprised that the spread was that big. And maybe I'm wrong, but I've seen enough of those Baltimore-Pittsburgh games that just are ugly and they're low scoring. That's a lot of points. So I'll take the Ravens, but I don't think it's that big a spread.
Okay. Bills -8.5 first Sunday game hosting the Broncos. I'm guessing we're both going Bills here.
Yeah, but Chud, I feel the same way about this game as I do the Ravens game. I thought the spread. I didn't think the spread would be that big. Obviously, I was wrong. I think Denver can put up some points against them. So I think Buffalo wins, but I would take the underdog if we're getting points.
Okay, so I'll disagree with you. I think it could be a close game possibly, but 8.5 seems like a lot, but it's not that far-fetched to think this game ends up 27-17 or 24-14. And that's where you get the cover, and a 10-point win. So I'll go Bills and the cover. Now, I think we just keep track of records of who wins, right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I didn't put a ton of thought into the spreads. Do that later in the week. All right, move on to Eagles -4.5 over the Packers. I believe it's my turn to go first. I think, this is tough for me since I picked the Packers to go to the Super Bowl, right? So, I want to jump on board with them. I think it comes down to Jalen Hurts, right? If he's healthy, then you feel good about the Eagles. If he's not, that opens up the door for the Packers to win. The Packers are just so inconsistent, too. And Love gets hurt every third game. So I'm going to go Eagles to win this.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. Inconsistent. I'm worried about Love. They lost Watson right to a knee injury. One of their deep threats, speed guy. I think Philly solved its problems There's all that Sirianni drama. I think they made the right decision by resting Saquon for that last game and not chasing the record. I like Philly. I like Philly and Philly by a touchdown.
Yeah, I'd probably think that too. Although you never know, man. This is that Fox Sunday 4:00 game. Could be close. I mean,
Green Bay's well coached. Green Bay's well coached. I like Love in general. So I wouldn't be stunned, but I feel pretty good about the Eagles.
Okay, so we're both going Eagles. I think you could put a competition up as the Chargers Titans, you said was the most difficult. You could say these next two are in that conversation, and you can make an argument this one could be the toughest one. Tampa Bay at home -3 against Washington. You're up first.
I'm going Washington. So it's a Tampa. I know what Baker's done, and it's been remarkable. And kudos to him. 40 touchdowns, 4,000 yards, and 70% completions. Like one of 4 guys ever to do it. He's playing great, and has played great. I think, they survived a bad division. They had some clunkers in there. Washington won 12 games. I feel like you got to pick some road team to go in and win a game. And I know I picked the Chargers to do that too, but I kind of like Washington. I kind of like Washington in this one. So I'm going to take Washington. Don't feel great about it, but I got Washington.
What am I missing here that it's a 3-point? Like, is it just because Tampa Bay's at home? And I'm kind of surprised they're favored by 3. Unless the line has changed. I'm just going by what I saw just recently here. Scott, man, you stole my thunder. I'm going Washington as well. I agree with you. Everything you said. A road team's going to win here or there, and Baker Mayfield. I'm putting my money on Washington here, and obviously that means if I think they're going to win, you take the 3 points. Sure. So Baker's got to show me that he can get the win here, and I just don't think he does it. So I'm going Washington, and I don't know if I feel like 100% confident, but like I'm not wavering on this. Yeah. So sure, could Tampa win? Absolutely. They're at home. They're a playoff team, but I'm going Washington. So we're on the same page there. All right, last game, Vikings at the Rams. Vikings -1. Ooh, this is a tough one. This is a Monday night, final one. Before you give me your pick, I'll go first. Do you agree this is a tough one, or do you feel Yeah, okay.
No, I think it's a tough one.
So are the toughest 3 games these last 2 we just talked about, and the Chargers? How would you rank them 1 through 3 toughest?
I'd probably go Vikings, Chargers, Washington.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree. I'm back and forth on this one. There's part of me that thinks, hey, let's go with the Rams. Historically, the Vikings do go deep in the playoffs, but as we know, they've never won a Super Bowl. Right. But I'm gonna say the Vikings. They've had some really great games this year, and they've had a heck of a season. The Rams turned it on late. Man, Stafford could get it done. This is why this line is 1. I am torn on this one. Call it a coin flip, but I'm going to go Vikings, but I'm not happy about it.
Yeah, the Vikings were better all year, right? They won 14 games, right? But yet they go on the road. They lost at such a tough game Sunday against the Lions, and by tough, just they were in position early, and then it got away from them. And you go from a bye in the number 1 seed and home field advantage to on the road in LA. And that's a big mental adjustment that these guys are going to have to make, because I'm sure they were all in on the number 1 seed. So I don't know how they're going to bounce back. That's a big thing. Maybe they're not ready. Maybe Sam Darnold doesn't bounce back. Maybe he's got 2 bad games in a row after playing so well all year, and they had chances in the red zone and he missed throws. we know that the Rams are really well coached. They've won a Super Bowl, Matt Stafford, all those things. Having said that, I'm going to go with the Vikings because they have been better all year. I really like Kevin O'Connell, their coach. I think Sam Darnold bounces back. I think they figure it out. If they lose, it's because Darnold's going to play not well. And then they're going to have a huge issue or a huge question to answer. Do they commit to him? Do they sign him to a franchise tag? All those things, right? A week ago, it felt like he was going to get a huge contract. And if they lose, maybe that changes, and that's life in the NFL. So I'm going to go Vikings, but I think it's going to be a great game.
We went the same across the board, didn't we?
I hate when that happens, Chuck.
I know. Oh my gosh. This is a fun time of year though. We obviously do our picks. I have a thing I do with a buddy of mine where there's 14 teams, used to be 12, 14 teams, and we do we figure out who gets to pick first, and then the goal is to get a team to the Super Bowl. And your goal is to try to pick the Super Bowl, and you just start a draft, and whoever gets first pick goes first. The next guy gets the next two, and then the guy gets 4 and 5, and we just go back and forth. So that's a lot of fun if anyone's looking for something fun to do. And we put a little wager on it, and we have fun with that. And then I got the mini helmets with my family where we pick out of the hat. So the NFL playoffs, it's just so fun, no question, leading up to the Super Bowl. So enjoy it, everyone. This is as bad as the Browns are, and basically we got, I don't know what other word to use. I won't say it, but it was just a pathetic year. It was a tough year for us as Browns fans. So at least we can enjoy some fun playoff football here, I think. What do you think, bud?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm with you. I love this. I love watching the NFL playoffs. I just hope we both don't go 0-6 with these picks.
That would be pretty incredible if that happened.
I know.
I think if I changed I feel pretty comfortable on most of them, but if I had to change them, I would probably change Texan Chargers first, Vikings Rams second.
Yeah, I'd probably go Rams and then Texans would probably be the way I'd go.
Okay. Yep. Hey, this was a good one, buddy. I mean, we got a ton in.
I appreciate it, Chud. We took a break. It's a two-parter. I hope people might have to listen in two parts, but I appreciate it. You got your treadmill work in. I'm going to go get a little treadmill work in. If I say it on the podcast, that means I got to go do it, right? So,
yeah, you got to do it. I actually did indoor track, Scott.
Oh, okay, that's good. I don't have one of those in my basement though, Chud. I got a treadmill in my basement.
Hey, let's be easy now. I'm on location.
That's great. Love it.
Yeah, I wish I had one.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I appreciate it as always, Chud. We'll check in on our picks next week, and I'm sure we'll have stuff to talk about. We'll probably have a Deshaun Watson update. Maybe we get some offensive coordinator, some more interviews there. So yeah, busy off season, and it's going to be a busy off season, and it's already off to a busy start. So we'll have plenty to talk about. So thank you, Chud. Thank you, Chud, as always. Thanks, everybody, for listening. This has been another episode of the Zone Coverage Podcast, and you can read all my work at brownzone.com. Thanks.